Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at how we can make reforestation even more effective for tackling climate change.
Yeah.
Our source is a brand new research article detailing a large-scale field trial in Wales where they combine two pretty cutting-edge strategies,
Interesting.
microbiome enrichment and enhanced rock weathering.
Wow.
They were looking for ways to supercharge carbon capture in newly planted forests, and the findings are pretty exciting.
Yeah.
There's also a twist that I definitely did not see coming.
Oh, cool. What's really intriguing about this study is the focus on optimizing, each tree's potential.
Yeah.
We know that global warming demands urgent action.
Right.
And that means not just reducing emissions, but actively pulling carbon out of the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Reforestation plays a crucial role in this.
For sure.
But we can't just assume that planting trees is enough, right? We need to make sure those trees are thriving and maximizing their carbon capture potential.
So it's not just about quantity, it's about quality, too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Kind of like choosing the right investments for your climate portfolio. We can't just scatter seeds and hope for the best.
Exactly. And that's where these two strategies come in.
Okay.
Microbiome enrichment focuses on giving the trees a healthy start by introducing beneficial microbes to the soil.
Uh-huh.
It's like giving them a probiotic boost for their root systems.
I like that analogy. So tell me more about how this probiotic boost works.
Okay.
What exactly did they do in this study?
They took soil from mature, thriving forests
Right.
and used it to inoculate the saplings they were planting.
Okay.
The idea is to introduce a diverse community of microbes that are already adapted to supporting tree growth,
Interesting.
including those amazing mycorrhizal fungi,
Yeah.
which form these incredible symbiotic relationships with tree roots.
So they're basically giving these baby trees a support system, right from the get-go.
Okay, exactly.
Like a welcoming committee for their roots. Did they see a big difference in growth?
They did. On average, the inoculated saplings were 7% larger than those that didn't get the microbial boost.
Okay.
That's a significant increase, especially when you consider the long-term impact on a whole forest.
Right.
But what's even more fascinating
Yeah.
is that the different tree species reacted in different ways.
Oh. Tell me more about these tree personalities. Which ones were the overachievers?
The oak trees really seemed to love their microbial cocktail.
Interesting.
They showed a 13% increase in biomass, which is pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
Alders, on the other hand, only showed a 1% increase.
Okay.
So it seems like some species are more receptive to this kind of intervention than others.
That makes me wonder if we could tailor the microbial mix to each species for even better results.
Yeah.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I'm curious about how long this growth boost lasts.
Sure.
Is it a one-time thing or a sustained advantage?
That's a great question, and that's one of the most interesting findings of the study.
Okay.
The effect of the inoculation wasn't constant over time. In the first year,
Yeah.
inoculated saplings were a whopping 28% larger than the control group.
Wow.
But by the third year, that difference had shrunk down to just 3%.
So it's more like a growth spurt than a steady increase?
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Did the microbes just disappear over time?
It's not that simple.
Go.
There are probably several factors at play.
Okay.
The composition of the microbial community itself might shift over time as different microbes thrive in the changing soil environment.
Right.
Or maybe the initial boost helps the trees establish themselves quickly, giving them a competitive advantage against weeds,
Yeah.
which reduces the need for that microbial edge later on.
So they graduate from microbial kindergarten and are ready to face the world on their own.
Exactly.
But even if it's a temporary boost, it sounds like it could have a big impact on the long-term success of the trees.
Exactly. The study found that larger saplings had a much higher survival rate.
That makes sense.
That initial growth spurt provided by the microbiome enrichment can make all the difference in those vulnerable early years.
Yeah.
And if a tree survives those early years,
Right.
it has a much greater chance of reaching maturity and fulfilling its carbon capturing potential.
That's great. So we've covered how giving trees a probiotic boost can help them thrive. Now let's move on to that second strategy you mentioned, enhanced rock weathering. What exactly does that involve?
Enhanced rock weathering, or ERW, is all about leveraging the natural process of rock weathering to capture carbon. Basically, it involves adding crushed basalt to the soil.
Basalt, like the volcanic rock.
Yeah.
And how does that help with carbon capture?
That's right. Basalt is a volcanic rock, And it has this amazing ability to react with carbon dioxide from the atmosphere as it breaks down naturally. The carbon gets locked away in a mineral form as the basalt weathers.
So we're essentially turning CO2 into stone. That sounds almost alchemical. It must have a pretty significant impact on the amount of carbon the soil can store.
It does. They found a 27% increase in something called aboveground carbon stock in the plots treated with ERW. Now, aboveground carbon stock might sound a bit technical, but it's essentially the amount of carbon stored in the tree's wood, leaves, and branches, all the parts we see above ground.
So it's a measure of how much carbon those trees are pulling out of the atmosphere and locking away. 27% is a pretty impressive increase. How much carbon are we talking about in real terms?
In just 3 years of this study, they found that the ERW treatment led to the capture of an additional 159 kilograms of carbon per hectare. That might not sound like a lot when you think about the scale of global emissions, but when you scale it up across large reforestation projects, it starts to become really significant.
It's all about those incremental gains adding up, right? But I have to admit, I'm still a bit hazy on the mechanics of it all. How does adding crushed rock actually lead to more carbon capture? Is it just the basalt itself absorbing the CO2?
It's a bit more complex than that. Adding basalt to the soil does a few things. Firstly, it raises the pH of the soil, making it less acidic. This is important because it makes crucial nutrients like calcium and magnesium more available to the trees. Secondly, the basalt itself contains some of these nutrients, which are slowly released as it weathers. And here's the really interesting part. The weathering process is actually accelerated by the presence of those beneficial microbes we talked about earlier. Remember the mycorrhizal fungi?
Yes, the microbial welcoming committee.
Right.
So they're not just helping the trees directly, they're also boosting the effectiveness of the ERW treatment.
Exactly. Those mycorrhizal fungi are like tiny miners working away in the soil, releasing nutrients from the basalt and making them available to the trees. It's a beautiful example of synergy in nature. And the end result is that the trees have access to more nutrients, which allows them to grow bigger and faster, capturing more carbon in the process.
So it's not just about adding rocks to the soil, it's about creating the right conditions for the entire ecosystem to thrive. It's a more holistic approach to reforestation.
Now, you mentioned a twist earlier. Does this have something to do with how these two strategies interact? Because, logically, you would think that combining them would be like a superpower combo for carbon capture, right?
You would think so, wouldn't you? But that's where things get really interesting and a bit unexpected.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat here. Tell me what happened when they combined these two seemingly awesome strategies.
Well, it turns out that 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2 in the world of ecosystems.
Right.
When they combined the microbiome enrichment with the ERW treatment, they found that the effectiveness of the ERW was basically canceled out.
Wait, what? Seriously? That's good. That's completely counterintuitive. You'd think that giving the trees the best of both worlds would lead to even better results.
Right. It was a real head scratcher for the researchers, too. They're still trying to figure out exactly why this happened, but they have a couple of hypotheses. Okay, I'm all ears. Lay those hypotheses on me.
One possibility is something called functional redundancy.
Okay.
Essentially, the idea is that once the basalt has done its job of adding nutrients to the soil and making the pH more favorable, the microbial boost might not provide any additional benefit. It's like giving someone a second meal when they've already eaten a huge feast. They're just not going to get any more full.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like they've already reached peak nutrient absorption. But wasn't there another possibility, too? Something about the rock additions actually hindering the microbes?
Yes, exactly. That's the second hypothesis.
Okay.
It's possible that the crushed basalt or the changes it causes in soil chemistry might actually create an environment that's less hospitable to the beneficial microbes introduced with the soil inoculum.
Interesting.
So instead of this beautiful synergy that we saw with ERW alone, we might actually be creating some kind of microbial conflict.
So it's not just about adding things to the ecosystem, it's about understanding how all those pieces fit together. It's like a delicate dance between the trees, the soil, and the microbes. And if we disrupt that balance, we might end up doing more harm than good.
Precisely. And that's why this study is so important. It highlights the need for a more nuanced approach to reforestation, one that takes into account the complex interactions within the ecosystem. We can't just assume that more is always better.
So what does this mean for people who are actually designing reforestation projects? Should they just pick one strategy or the other?
For now, that might be the most prudent approach. at least until we have a better understanding of how these two strategies interact in different contexts.
Okay.
There are trade-offs to consider with each approach.
Right.
Microbiome enrichment seems to have a much stronger effect in the first year, which could be crucial in challenging environments where those young saplings are particularly vulnerable.
Yeah.
But it might require repeated applications, which could be impractical or even disruptive to the ecosystem in the long run.
So it's like giving those trees a strong start, but then they need to learn to fend for themselves. What about ERW? What are the trade-offs there?
Well, ERW provides a more gradual but potentially more sustained benefit over time. But the effectiveness of ERW depends on a few factors, including the type of basalt used and the specific soil chemistry of the site. And of course, we need to consider the environmental impact of sourcing and transporting large quantities of rock.
It's all about weighing the pros and cons and making informed decisions based on the specific context of each project. It sounds like there's still a lot of research to be done before we can truly harness the power of these strategies.
Absolutely. This study opens up a whole new avenue of research. We need to understand not just how these strategies work individually, but how they interact with each other and with the wider ecosystem.
For sure.
And we need to consider the long-term implications, not just for carbon capture, but for biodiversity, soil health, and the overall resilience of the forest.
It's a reminder that nature is complex and interconnected, and that there are no easy solutions. But the potential rewards are enormous. If we can crack the code of carbon capturing reforestation, we can make a real difference in the fight against climate change.
I completely agree. And this research gives us a glimpse of what's possible. It's an invitation to think more deeply about how we can work with nature to create a more sustainable future.
So, for all of us listening out there, here's a question to ponder. If you were designing a reforestation project, which approach would you prioritize? And what factors would influence your decision? It's a great starting point for further exploration of this fascinating and vital field.
I love that challenge.
Yeah.
Keep those questions in mind as you continue to learn and explore, because ultimately, the more informed we are, the better equipped we'll be to support and advocate for truly effective climate solutions.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of carbon capturing reforestation. And as always, stay curious, keep learning, and let's keep exploring the amazing possibilities of a world in balance.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Until next time.